Okay, so I think we all know that one person, right? The one who just goes completely overboard for Halloween. I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Fake cobwebs everywhere,
Yeah.
spooky music blasting from every speaker, maybe even one of those fog machines pouring out of the front door.
Mm. But have you ever wondered why? Like, where does all this fascination with all things spooky actually come from? I mean, why is it that we carve pumpkins and dress up in costumes and tell ghost stories this time of year? Well, get ready because in this deep dive, we are uncovering the pretty surprising history behind Halloween. You might think it's all about candy and costumes, but it actually goes back centuries, and the origins are way spookier than you might think. And to help us unpack all of this, we have with us a resident expert in Halloween history and folklore.
It's great to be here. And you're right, Halloween has really deep roots. It might seem like something modern, but the very beginning actually goes back over 2,000 years to Ireland and this ancient Celtic festival called Samhain. Samhain. It's like one of those words that you just know should only be whispered in the dark forest.
Yeah.
So what exactly was it, and why should we even care about it today?
Well, Sam Hain pronounced Samhain. It wasn't just a party for the ancient Celts, it was really a major turning point in their year. Imagine it's the end of the harvest season, the days are getting shorter, winter's coming, and there's this real sense of transition uncertainty in the air. And for the Celts, this was a time when they believed that the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead, it was at its thinnest point.
So almost like a spiritual doorway creaking open just a bit.
Yeah.
I guess that makes trick-or-treating seem pretty tame by comparison, right?
You could definitely say that. The Celts really believed that during Samhain, spirits could cross over from the other side. And that meant they had to take precautions. So they built these huge bonfires. Just imagine flames flickering against the night sky. And they wore costumes often made from animal skins and heads to ward off any evil spirits. They also made offerings of food and drink to appease the dead.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to get some Halloween vibes from all of that. But were they just afraid of, like, ghosts? Or was there something else going on? Something in the Celtic imagination that made it even spookier?
Well, ghosts were definitely something they worried about, but the Celts were really concerned about another supernatural being, fairies. But we're not talking about, the cute Tinkerbell type. These fairies were powerful, often malevolent beings, and they could play tricks on people or even kidnap them.
Kidnapped by fairies. Now, that's a whole other level of stranger danger.
Exactly. And some fairies were even believed to be the spirits of the dead, trapped between worlds. So that added another layer of fear to how they interacted with humans.
So it sounds like Samhain wasn't just about celebrating the harvest or remembering those who had passed, but also about navigating a world that was full of unseen forces, both good and bad. It's pretty amazing how all of those anxieties about the unknown still resonate with us today, even if we don't exactly believe in fairies anymore. But how did this ancient festival become the Halloween that we know and love? I mean, I'm guessing at some point they had to trade those animal skins for something from Party City.
Right, and a big part of that is because of the spread of Christianity. As the church gained more influence, they tried to suppress pagan traditions like Samhain, but instead of getting rid of them completely, they often just absorbed them.
So a bit of a cultural mashup.
Exactly. So in the 8th century, Pope Gregory I, he moved the Feast of All Saints' Day to November 1st, most likely to coincide with Samhain and make it easier for Celtic converts to make the change. And then All Souls' Day, which is dedicated to remembering the dead. That was added on November 2nd.
Okay, so now we're starting to see those familiar Halloween dates take shape. But what about trick-or-treating? Was that part of the original Samhain celebration, or did that come later?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. The practice of going door to door asking for treats, it's actually rooted in those ancient Celtic offerings that they made to the spirits. But it also kind of echoes this medieval practice called souling, where people would go house to house offering prayers for the dead in exchange for these little cakes called soul cakes.
So from placating, potentially angry spirits to praying for souls, the idea of a Halloween treat has a long and pretty diverse history. But what about those iconic jack-o'-lanterns? Were they part of Samhain too, or is that a newer thing?
Their origin actually lies in this Irish legend of Stingy Jack. He was a trickster who managed to outsmart the devil not once but twice, but his cleverness had a price.
Wait, hold on. I'm picturing some mischievous leprechaun running around playing pranks on the devil. Am I on the right track?
You're not too far off. So the legend says that when Jack died, he was denied entry to both heaven and hell because of all of his trickery, and so he was condemned to wander the earth with only a burning coal inside a carved-out turnip to light his way.
Okay, I can see where the jack-o'-lantern comes in. But a turnip? I thought it was always
Well,
pumpkins.
they are now. When Irish immigrants brought their Halloween traditions to America in the 19th century, they realized that pumpkins were a lot easier to find and to carve than turnips. So the American jack-o'-lantern was born, an old legend combined with something new from the New World.
And that, my friends, is how a mischievous soul who was condemned to wander the earth with a burning turnip became a symbol of this global holiday. But Halloween's journey wasn't over yet. It was about to face a whole new set of challenges and transformations as it took root in America. But before we head across the Atlantic, let's take a moment to think about what we've learned so far. We've seen how Halloween came from a mix of ancient Celtic traditions and Christian influences, and how fears of spirits and fairies shaped those early celebrations. And it's pretty fascinating how those anxieties about the unknown still echo in our fascination with all things spooky and macabre. But as Halloween began to grow in America, it would encounter all sorts of new cultural forces, from those playful pranks to mass-produced costumes that would shape it even further. So stay tuned because we're about to dive into how Halloween changed from this small festival to the global phenomenon that it is today.
You know, as these Halloween traditions were coming to America with Irish immigrants, they found themselves in a totally new cultural landscape.
It really is amazing how a holiday can travel, across oceans and continents, bringing all of those old beliefs and practices with it. But I'm guessing it wasn't exactly smooth sailing for Halloween in America. Were there any specific challenges or changes that it went through as it kind of took root here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just think about it. America in the 1800s was this huge mix of cultures and different beliefs. So not everyone was ready to embrace a celebration that was all about, spirits, fairies, and spooky stuff.
So how did Halloween actually win over those skeptical Americans? Was it the promise of free candy? Or maybe just the fun of dressing up and kind of letting loose a little?
Well, those were definitely part of it, but it was a slow process. Halloween's appeal, especially for younger people, it was just too good to resist.
Yeah.
And as those immigrant communities grew and became part of American society, their traditions started to blend in with existing American customs.
So kind of like a cultural exchange, a spooky potluck where everyone brings their own traditions to the table.
Exactly. But as Halloween became more popular, especially with kids and teenagers, its mischievous side really started to show. Remember those Celtic beliefs about fairies and how much they loved to play pranks? Well, that idea found a new way to express itself in America.
So this is where we get the whole Halloween prank thing. I've heard some pretty crazy stories about those early celebrations, like how some of the pranks went way beyond just harmless fun.
Yeah, you're right. Those early Halloween pranks in America could get really out of hand. We're talking property damage, vandalism, even some really dangerous situations. Imagine waking up to find your cow on your roof or your wagon wheels gone.
Okay, yeah, that's way beyond just trick-or-treating. Sound like those mischievous fairies might have been whispering some not-so-good ideas to people. But seriously, that kind of behavior couldn't have gone on forever. So how did Halloween go from this night of potential chaos to the more family-friendly holiday we know today?
Well, it took a real effort from communities and parents to kind of tame Halloween's wild side. They needed to find a way to channel all of that youthful energy into something positive and safe. And that's when trick-or-treating, as we know it, really started to take off.
So basically, the solution to all the pranks was just to bribe kids with candy. That's a pretty clever parenting strategy. But how did trick-or-treating change from a few local customs into something that everyone does across the country?
Well, it was a few things. Community leaders, they saw trick-or-treating as a way to stop all the vandalism. And it was a fun, supervised activity for kids. Parents like the idea of having a controlled way for their children to celebrate Halloween. And of course, everyone loves free candy.
Especially when it comes to those fun-sized packages. But I bet those early trick-or-treaters weren't exactly showing up in those elaborate costumes you buy in stores today. What did those first Halloween outfits even look like?
You're right. They were a lot simpler back then. Kids usually wore homemade disguises using whatever they could find around the house. Old clothes sheets, masks made from scraps of fabric. It was all about being creative and using your imagination to turn yourself into something spooky or surprising.
It's kind of funny to think how those simple DIY costumes have evolved into the big elaborate ones we see now. But that probably didn't happen overnight. When did Halloween costumes become a big business?
Well, that's where the whole commercialization of Halloween really takes off. By the mid-1900s, candy companies, they realized that Halloween was a huge opportunity to sell lots of candy. And costume companies, they weren't too far behind. They started selling pre-made costumes that let kids turn into their favorite characters. Cowboys, princesses, superheroes, you name it.
And I'm sure the rise of television had something to do with it too. I mean, all those old sitcoms and cartoons must have helped to make trick-or-treating even more popular. And they kind of created this shared idea of what Halloween fun was all about.
Oh, absolutely. Television had a big influence on how Americans celebrated Halloween. Shows like Ozzie and Harriet and Disney cartoons with trick-or-treating themes, they helped to make the whole tradition seem normal and turn it into part of mainstream American culture.
It's amazing how much the media can shape our perceptions of things, even our traditions. But I have to ask, with all this focus on candy and costumes and making it fun for kids, did Halloween lose some of its spooky side?
Not really. Even though Halloween was definitely becoming more commercialized and family-friendly, its connection to the supernatural and the macabre didn't go away. In fact, it was about to get a big boost from a new source, Hollywood.
Ah, yes, the horror movie. I bet all those early slasher films really helped to give Halloween its reputation as a time for thrills and chills.
You got it. Movies like Halloween, with its iconic masked killer Michael Myers, they tacked into those primal fears of the unknown that we've been talking about. And they reminded people that Halloween wasn't just about candy and costumes, it was also about facing those darker sides of human nature and the things that go bump in the night.
So as Halloween evolved in America, it became this really interesting mix of lighthearted fun commercialism and a good dose of horror movie chills. But there's one part of Halloween that we haven't really talked about yet, something that goes all the way back to those ancient Celtic fears of the supernatural world.
You're talking about witches, right?
Exactly. So when and why did witches become such a big part of the whole Halloween story?
Yeah. It is kind of strange how witches went from being figures of, fear and reverence to being so connected to Halloween. Did that come from those early Celtic traditions, or is there something else that we're missing?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Remember how we talked about those Celtic fairies? Those powerful beings that could, control nature and even influence people's lives? Well, when Christianity started to spread those beliefs about fairies, didn't just disappear. They often changed and kind of merged with existing folklore and anxieties about the supernatural world.
So some of those fairy qualities, like their power and potential for mischief, did that get transferred over to the idea of a witch? Exactly. And this whole blending of beliefs was made even stronger by all of this social and religious upheaval that was happening in those early centuries. The witch hunts in the 1500s and 1600s, they were driven by fear and religious intolerance. And they really solidified this image of the witch as a dangerous figure, someone who worked with the devil and was a threat to society.
It's a pretty dark time in history. And it's scary to think how easily fear and suspicion can be used to target people and groups. But how did this fear of witches become so tied to Halloween?
Well, Halloween, with its roots in pagan traditions and focus on the supernatural, it became an easy target for people who saw witches as a threat. King James I of England, he was really suspicious of witches, and he even connected them to Catholicism. He saw Halloween as a celebration of evil forces.
So basically, Halloween became this scapegoat, like a symbol of everything that those in power were afraid of and wanted to get rid of. It's amazing how a holiday can get caught up in such complex social and political stuff. But even with all those attempts to make Halloween seem bad, it still survived. It kind of went underground and became even more mysterious and kind of appealing.
Right. And as Halloween kept changing, certain figures and symbols emerged that would really connect it to the supernatural world. One of those figures is shrouded in mystery, carries a flickering lantern, and they would become a true Halloween icon.
Wait a minute, are you talking about Stingy Jack? You know, the guy with the turnip and the burning coal? The inspiration for the jack-o'-lantern?
That's the one. That simple legend passed down for generations. It captures what Halloween is all about: mischief, mystery, and a little touch of the macabre.
And as Halloween's journey continued across the ocean and through all the twists and turns of American culture, that flickering lantern would light the way for everyone who came after. From those ancient Celtic bonfires to our modern haunted houses, Halloween has been shaped by so many things: religion, immigration, commercialism, pop culture. But it still has that same basic appeal. It's about facing our fears and embracing the mysteries of life and death.
It really shows the power of tradition and how much we need to connect with the unknown. What started as a small local festival is now celebrated all over the world. It just goes to show how much those old fears and fascinations still matter to us today, even as the ways we express them change over time.
And that's probably the biggest thing we can take away from our deep dive into the history of Halloween. It's so much more than just candy and costumes. It's a reflection of how fascinated we are by the line between different worlds, by the things that go bump in the night. and by those questions that just keep coming back to us.
That's a great way to put it. Halloween lets us face our fears, use our imaginations, and be a little mischievous.
So as we head into this Halloween season, I hope you will keep all of this in mind. Next time you see a jack-o'-lantern, think about Stingy Jack and his wandering soul. When you see someone in costume, remember those ancient Celts trying to scare away evil spirits. And when you grab that fun-sized candy bar, remember the long, strange journey that Halloween took to get to you. And with that, we wrap up our deep dive into the history of Halloween. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with us through time and tradition. Be sure to join us next time as we explore another fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious, keep exploring, and hey, maybe leave a little treat out for the fairies. You never know who might be watching.